Hey everyone, today I want to talk about Days of Heaven from 1978 by Terrence Malick. This is the 42nd episode of my 1000 favorite movie series, where I talk about the movies I love the most in a random order. Ah, the power of rewatches. Is it a weakness or a strength when movies improve after subsequent viewings? Maybe it was a weakness back in the days when once a movie left town, your chances of seeing it ever again became almost none if you didn't have resources. But now, in the days of home media and streaming services, I'd say it's certainly a strength. Much of the time for me, rewatching a movie is even better than watching them for the first time. Because now that we know completely what to expect out of the movie, it's like we can pay attention more and focus on different aspects more. Many of my favorite movies are favorites solely based on rewatches. My first video, The Double Life of Veronique, was such a film, and Days of Heaven is also one. And like the Kiyosaki movie, this took me several viewings, I'd say about four to be exact, to really love it. I never disliked it, but my general feeling was that while it certainly had nice shots and so on, the story was kind of weak, and the pace really dragged, making an hour and a half feel like at least two. But the thing about movies that so many people love is that sometimes you gotta keep giving them chances. I did for this, and now it's definitely a candidate for my favorite Terrence Malick film. And now that it is a favorite, I've changed my opinion that the story is weak. It's simple, sure, but it feels very purposeful in terms of what the movie's going for. It centers around three people: Bill, played by Richard Gere in one of his first starring roles, his girlfriend Abby, played by Brooke Adams, and his sister Linda, played by Linda Manns. After an incident at the factory where he works, they run away and take a train out to this huge farm, just an enormous infinite wheat field, where they work. In the meantime, the owner of the farm, played by Sam Shepard, falls in love with Abby and invites the group to stay, and they do so with the intention of inheriting his wealth, as the farmer's been diagnosed with a fatal disease that'll kill him soon. This setup is straightforward, but the narrative does some very interesting things with it. For one, the dynamic of the trio has a strange layer of ambiguity to it. To be clear, Linda is supposed to be Bill's sister, even though it looks like there's a big age difference. Bill and Abby are really lovers, but they pass themselves off as brother and sister the whole time. Despite us knowing it not to be true, they look like they could pass for a father mother daughter family unit. On top of that, Abby marries a farmer in the course of the movie, which sort of makes him like Linda's stepfather in a way. There's also the fact that we don't really know why the farmer is dying, and why he appears to be so healthy and active for a dying man. The ending is also ambiguous, though I won't spoil it. But the most interesting thing about the narrative is the narration. The narrator is actually the least consequential character plot wise, Linda, and so she's able to give sort of an outsider's perspective on the events. But more than this, even though she looks like a child, she comes across as much older and wiser, while still keeping her childlike naivete. For example, she says things like, "Sometimes I feel very old, like my whole life is over, like I'm not around no more." Or evocative things like, "This farmer, he didn't know when he first saw her, or what it was about her that caught his eye. Maybe it was the way the wind blew through her hair." She also says many short philosophical statements like, "Nobody's perfect. There is never a perfect person around. You just got half devil and half angel in you." This kind of narration coming from a child can easily sound forced and written, and usually I'd think so, but Linda Mann's voice is so amazing that she easily gets away with everything. Her voice is gentle, yet rich and world weary, and it's always a highlight to hear her speak and ruminate. And speaking of rumination, her voice might as well be representative of the whole movie, which plays as gently and as contemplatively as she speaks. I used to think that the pace of this movie dragged, and if all you're concerned with is the plot progressing, then I suppose it does. But the movie's concerned with much more than that. I suppose the film can be split more or less into two parts: the story slash character part and the nature part. There isn't all that much dialogue in the story part, being just enough to get the important points across. Rather, the things you remember the most are the faces of the characters, and how their looks tell the story and reveal their emotions, not necessarily their words. Perhaps this is why we feel sympathy for every character in the film, and it feels like we understand them. The story segments work hand in hand with the other part of the film, the crudely put, quote, nature part. Seamlessly weaved throughout from beginning to end are glorious shots of nature and the animals that inhabit it, that don't have any relation to the story, but make for a rich and deep world. It also makes the story and humans seem more elemental, like all living creatures are connected by nature. The best example of how these affect each other is when the farmer sees Bill and Abby together and discovers their secret. The locusts come and take over, making it basically hell on earth. The environment mirrors his feelings. This is plot related, but what I would call the nature part also includes the many shots of people simply playing or messing around in the environment, further showing off the beauty of the environment while still being grounded in the character's feelings. But what's also interesting is how, despite the fields being absolutely huge, they rarely dwarf the humans. Instead of lots of long shots, the characters are almost always plainly in view. This isn't to say that the movie doesn't have wide shots of lots of people like those found in a traditional epic. Since this movie takes place in the Depression and a lot of workers come to the farm, there are many shots of large amounts of people, as well as shots of the technology, from the trains to the huge machines used in the harvest. Especially in the first 30 minutes, there are several epic shots of trains moving, workers working, and machines chugging along. All of these shots are beautifully integrated into the story in a way that we're never so caught up in the story that we forget about the wonderful nature, and we're never so caught up in the nature shots that we lose sight of the story progression. They coexist naturally, and the editing that manages all this poetically makes time flow kind of like how time in real life flows. The plot points and important information can sometimes just come and go, not taking up a lot of screen time, and the next thing you know, you're in the next situation, like how I would argue real life can sometimes feel. The plot itself might be slow moving, but I've realized that the movie never drags as a result of its unique time flow. What also makes this movie riveting to watch is the famous cinematography. Shot by two legendary cinematographers, Nestor Almendros and Haskell Wexler, much of the film was shot during the golden hour, which gives the film a likely unrealistic but beautiful portrait of the wheat fields. But other scenes stand out too, such as this haunting one near the beginning of the family's apartment shrouded in darkness. The music is nearly as memorable, using Carnival of the Animals as a theme, and thereby instantly providing the most sensual of atmospheres. But the other original songs, by none other than Ennio Morricone, also complement the movie and its rhythms really well. Now for my favorite moments. I'll start with probably my favorite scene, which is when the locusts come. This is a huge set piece overall, but my favorite part is the beginning, as the locusts gradually take over. It's a very slow build-up, as they start appearing one by one inside the house, like on a cabbage, floating in water, or on a letter. Once we start to see them eating this in extreme close-up, like a nature documentary, we know it means trouble. It all builds and leads up to probably the most stunning shot of the movie, where these bodies are carefully arranged as the locusts swarm up. Just wow. Next, I love the brief shot of the plant growing out of the ground. The camera goes underneath the dirt and tracks it as it's slowly growing. I assume that this is the real deal, but if so, how do they do it? Finally, one shot that I'd love to see on the big screen if possible is the one where the airplanes take off. I love the composition of it, like how they take off circling the characters in the house. But mostly, I love how you really get the sense of the planes lifting off of the ground. The second plane is especially so close to the camera that is thrilling and makes you think about the possibilities of flight. Like how one minute a person can be next to you, but the next they can be in the air, flying in the distance. But in the end, what I love about Days of Heaven is that it earns its reputation of being one of the most beautiful movies ever made, and does so while telling a simple story in a way that complements the beauty of the images. This was only Malick's second feature film, but it already cemented the style of poetic storytelling that he would continue to use for the rest of his career until now. But unlike his movies, basically from The Tree of Life on, which I've regrettably only seen two of as of this video, this doesn't forget about compelling narrative progression and at no point feels pretentious or indulgent. It's kind of a minor miracle, to be honest, that he made a movie set almost entirely in a wheat field and didn't use a single close up of a hand brushing through it, something unimaginable today. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to go off on a tangent, but what I'm trying to say is that Days of Heaven strikes a perfect balance between visual and narrative poetry, making it one of my 1000 favorite movies. Thanks for watching my video. Gozaimasu. Have you seen Days of Heaven? Let me know what you think in the comments. I think of all my favorite movies as my friends, and I think of my audience as friends too. Remember, I upload a new video every Friday, so if you want to help me complete this 1000 favorite movies epic, don't forget to like and subscribe.